All right, here we are. It is that time again for your weekly dose of common sense. It just happens to be November 8, 2024, post-election +1, or is this post-election 0 plus, whatever it is. It is a +1 day from the earth-shattering election that happened on Tuesday. And those who are lamenting it, I'm sorry. Those who are celebrating, I'm with you. It was an incredible night. And, you know, for those who follow Common Sense, we might get the introductories over with. So we are commonsenseohioshow.com. You can catch us on all the socials. That's my way of saying social media sites. We appreciate it if you like and share. You know, we do this. We take our time. We put some effort into it, and we appreciate that we're getting feedback from everybody. The more feedback, the better for us, because it tells us that you're actually listening. And if you got a comment, you got a question, you think you can hang at the table, well, let's go ahead and do it. You know, go to commonsenseohioshow.com, shoot us a note or send us a comment on wherever you're catching the show, and we'll do our best to get back to you. You know, we've been tracking this date in history, in November 8 in 2024. I almost led with this without telling everybody the date, but for the first time in 40 years, the Republican Party wins control of both the U.S. House of Representatives and the Senate in midterm congressional elections. That is in 1994.
Wow.
Midterm.
Okay.
In the midterm, yeah. Okay. Newt Gingrich, coming out of Georgia, replaced Tom Foley of Washington as the Speaker of the House, and inspired and empowered the GOP contract with America. This became the Republican Revolution, where the Republicans decided we're going to sort of get together and have an agenda.
Yeah.
And this was, for those who didn't live through it, was the midterm of Clinton's first presidency, I believe, Slick Willie.
Yeah.
And, you know, Clinton was later, I don't know if he's given credit for it, but credit is due there. And with the Republican Revolution, we had a balanced budget.
Yeah,
we did. And, you know, if you look at this, the Republicans and the Democrats were at odds beyond belief. I mean, they were at each other's throats, and people thought it was bad now. It was bad back then too.
Yeah.
You know, and this led to I think in his second term, the impeachment and everything else. But what happened is somehow they reached across the aisles.
Yeah.
With the executive branch, and they got some stuff done. And Bill Clinton was able to do that. He had the wherewithal to do that. And I think, I don't know if he's given enough credit. I don't even know if I give him enough credit for that. Because he could have dug his heels in and said, go F yourselves.
Right.
I'm going to do what I want to do. And it could have just been a nothing.
Right.
Now, on the other hand, to balance a budget, you have to do two things, one of two things, or both. You have to bring in more money, or you have to spend less money. And if you don't have control of the executive branch and the Congress, then you can't really spend any money.
Yeah, one of the two greatest things that came out of that was in the Supreme Court, I think, struck down one of them, which was the line item veto. It gave the president the power, instead of vetoing the entire spending bill, he could veto lines of it.
Yeah.
Right? And Gingrich wanted Clinton to have that power.
Yeah.
Right? Because, hey, if you want to knock something out of the budget, go ahead.
Yeah, why not? You know, that's less spending.
That's less spending.
Well, and I wonder if he had the foresight going, you know, when we get a Republican in there, I want them to have that kind of power.
Oh, definitely.
You know, I mean, again, it's that we've talked about this before, too. What you think is going to serve you right now.
It's short money.
It's a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
That it's either positive or negative when your guy or woman is in.
Clinton was a fiscal conservative. People probably remember that famous line right after what Steve said, that midterm election. His next State of the Union speech, he said, you know, the era of big government is over.
Yeah.
Of course, it was no such thing.
Well,
but
by 2010, it was all over. It was all done.
But it's amazing that he took that election message that the population gave to Gingrich. They bought into his contract, you know, with America. And then 2 months later, Clinton is saying, okay.
Yeah, I'm in.
The era of big government's over. Let's go for it.
I'm in. And he also embraced things like, you know, the tough on crime and cleaning up the street. I mean,
yeah.
You know, he got, and all those things he's now sort of criticized for by his own party for doing the, you know, but on the other hand, you know, he understood, he was a great politician, I think. Maybe not enough credit is given to him for that.
That's
he was
right.
a great politician. And I don't mean just to serve his own ends, but you know, he sort of, like you said, I think he sort of felt the pulse of what was going on and fell into step. Now, his ideology might have been completely different.
Right. He was a natural politician, is still. I think in one of his endorsement, like whatever you call that, like a quickie news conference, he for Kamala, he said, yeah, the border is too wide open, and probably that young lady, one of the cases where the girl was, killed, he said probably if we had a tighter policy on the border, she'd be alive today.
Yep.
And that was, and that's what people obviously felt in the voting booth.
Well, look, trying to convince people to do things throughout my career, right? I go to court and I try to convince judges not to be so harsh on my client, or I convince juries that my understanding of the facts or our side of the facts is right and theirs is wrong. You have to embrace the truth.
Yeah.
On some level. You have to find out where there's play in the joints, but you can't change. In fact, when I prepare for trials, I have a big whiteboard, and the first thing I write is facts without change. Things that we can't change. We can't change this.
Yeah.
And the Democrats couldn't change at least three things. One, the border was wide open and it was their fault.
Yes.
Right? And they can act like it wasn't their fault, but they can't change that.
Right.
The second thing they couldn't change is inflation took off under their regime.
That's right.
And you could argue that that's because Trump left us this, but you can't sell that. It's a fact without change. I had three, and I can't remember the third one.
Well, a lot of speech suppression took place regarding COVID, regarding economic policy, regarding foreign policy. That was under Joe, and it all came out because Elon disgorged all this Twitter files of these meetings that with the FBI and the CIA, telling them, your Section 230 protections are up for grabs unless you suppress these platforms.
Yeah, and I guess they can't change that either.
That can't change.
Happened under their regime.
That's right.
It just did.
It just did.
And they didn't. And I think I finally heard when I saw this election, I flipped over to CNN, MSNBC, and it eventually they acknowledged it.
Yeah.
They were like, look, the America's spoken. They don't like these things.
Yeah.
Now, they quickly said, and it was also because of racism and sexism.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know if there's any proof of that at all. In fact, there might be some counterproof to that based on the voting, based on who voted for Trump.
Well, especially the racism. I mean, I'm hearing certain Puerto Rican vote went to Republican, I guess.
Huge percentage of the Hispanic vote.
Hispanic vote.
Puerto Rican vote. Black men.
Yeah, that you would expect
women.
would go one way and it didn't. And again, it's that we vote by our pocketbook.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're feeling painful at the gas pump or at the grocery store, you got to go over that hurdle.
That's what Carville. We were talking about Clinton, and that's what Carville told Clinton. It's the economy, stupid.
Always
Stay
is.
on message.
It always
it's
is.
The economy.
And if you don't address it properly, as the Harris campaign must not have, you don't get the vote.
Well, she ignored it. And she lied about it.
She tried to gaslight people.
She took the facts without change and tried to gaslight them and say, well, these aren't really happening.
Yeah.
And I heard somebody, a very close friend of mine yesterday, saying, look, the economy's not that bad. And I'm like,
oh my God.
I'm like, listen, man, with your $250,000 a year salary, maybe not. Maybe you're not going out as much, or maybe you still are because your kids are out of the house and you got plenty of expendable income. But if you don't, it matters.
Yeah.
It is bad.
Yeah. I was at Kroger last night. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was at Kroger last night, and Joe Scarborough, his wife slapped him down on Morning Joe about the price of butter.
I saw that.
Regular Kroger brand butter was $8.29 last night for 4 sticks. It used to be $1.50.
And it's not price gouging.
No.
Eggs were 88 cents a dozen.
Yeah.
I remember spending 88 cents a dozen.
Butter right now is off the hook.
And it's,
and you use that in baking in a lot of recipes.
We may be insulated from the renter price because we own our homes.
We own our home, and we're locked in a mortgage.
Right. And now we're seeing, our kids, we're hearing it from them what their rent is. And I hear that from my daughter. I'm going, I never paid that in a mortgage payment.
Yeah, it's off
what they're paying for rent.
It's off.
That's a majority of what they're taking. It's going out every check
because they can't get a mortgage.
Exactly.
So they can't buy a house, so they got to rent.
Yeah,
essentially an apartment
and
or
usually
a condo.
Do when you're that young, in your 20s, before you start to get settled.
But now they're in their 30s and they're still renting.
It's insane
because you can't get a mortgage.
Yeah,
and the other, I guess the third leg of this stool is that the social agenda that they trotted out and supported was really, and I hear the same person I was talking to said, well, the Republicans made such a big deal out of this. I was like, They made a big deal out of it because it started to hit home when their daughters were looking at the possibility, even if it didn't happen, just the possibility of a man in the locker room.
Right.
Well, you know, they didn't have anything to do with that. Yes, they did. They did. The Title IX stuff, all that stuff was a result of the Democratic agenda. And it's not, you know, you can't run from those facts. Those are what they are. Those are the facts. Now you weigh that against Trump.
It's ivory tower stuff, Steve. These gender studies programs that blossom across the universities of America, they took that mindset and tried to mainstream it. In the middle, the people in the middle, independent people, minorities, you know, they were shocked that, like you say, the Latino vote or the black male vote, you know, Trump got a big chunk of that. He also got the 18 to 25-year-old demographic. He won that demographic.
Yeah.
I mean, what's that tell you? People just aren't buying in to a man with a penis can call himself a woman.
So then when's enough? You know, and I heard I heard Ben Shapiro put it this way. It's like America stood up on its hind legs and said, F you, not anymore. We're drawing a line in the sand right here, right now. And you can call him Hitler. You can say whatever you want, but this stuff, you cannot get around this stuff. We're not going to tolerate it.
Right.
And then I started to think why, because the Democrat response to this was, how could they possibly, or the Democrat response to this, to wash those issues out of the way, was Trump's Hitler.
Yeah.
Or he's a fascist.
Right.
Or, you know, he's racist, or he's going to have internment camps, or he's going to,
it's
the
last,
rights.
Oprah said it's the last election we're ever going to have.
This sort of hyperbolic nonsense. And I don't think anybody bought it because when I always attribute this back to, if I'm trying to sell crap like that to a jury, it's just not going to work. It doesn't work. You got to have some semblance in the truth and in the facts.
Right.
And the problem with it ultimately was the Democrat, or Kamala Harris, did not. She couldn't run from that. She could not run from that. And the people, they would take anything other than that. Yeah. So when it gets so bad, they take anything other than that. So if you're wondering why you would vote for such a brash New York a-hole, that's as they would say, it's because they don't like you.
Yeah.
Right? They don't like you.
Well, the recidivist lying, I think, led up to when she tried to change her policy mix because
she lied.
She and her cohorts lied about Biden's dementia for at least 2 years. Okay. And then suddenly, after a bad debate, they go, yeah, you know what? He does have dementia. Well, it's like, well, you lied to us for 2 years saying he didn't. Now, you know, conveniently enough, you say he does, and Kamala is going to swap seats with him. And so when she said, I'm no longer against fracking, I'm not going to try to put the oil business out of business, I'm not going to push the trans agenda on the American people, I'm pro Second Amendment, and I'm going to build more wall, people just didn't believe her.
They didn't believe her because it was BS.
It was BS. She wasn't going to do that
stuff. She didn't have credibility. So I started to write this down. And I was thinking, I was driving home the other day. I was like, how come they voted for Trump? And I was like, you know what the other side's going to say is because they're stupid. Or they're ignorant, or they're fooled, or whatever it would be. Right. So it dawned on me. And
uneducated.
This diatribe, my diary of my brain came out. It's like they voted for Trump not because they were dumb, but because they were smart, not because they were ignorant, because they were informed, not because they were fooled, but because they weren't, not because of their identity with a certain group, because they were individuals, right?
Yeah.
And not to change American values, but to save them.
Yeah.
Not because Trump is perfect, because he was good enough, right? And that was like. That is it.
That's it.
That is it.
He was the better alternative. And even if you disliked him, right, a lot of people voted for him holding their nose, saying he's the least worst.
Right. Not because he was Trump, because he wasn't Kamala.
And you heard that a lot.
A
lot. And let's hope this is the last time we have to say that phrase.
Yeah.
I hope
we have better candidates.
I hope so.
You guys know that, like in the previous one, I wanted Ted, and then I wanted Ron DeSantis. I'm not a Trump guy, but yeah, why would I hold my negative view of Trump and just say like anybody but Trump? That's ridiculous. Yeah. If he is the least damaging and it aligns the most with my view of what government should be, why would I not vote for him and overcome his personality, defects,
Yeah.
and to go ahead and vote for him. And that's what I did.
Right. Right. Yeah. And going back to your hyperbole, I feel really bad for the folks that did believe the extremes. There was a mourning going on.
Yes.
MOURNING.
Yeah, there was. Right.
Of just total, like, flabbergasted, just the world's going to come to an end. And it's like, I don't know, maybe I'm the eternal optimist. I've turned into one because I was somewhat pessimistic when I was younger, but it's just, I don't think it's just not going to be that.
Our lived experience would
end
tell
of
us
the world.
Right.
Exactly. It isn't.
He was president for 4 years.
Yeah.
There was no fascistic behavior. There was no Hitlerian behavior.
And I think that might be some of that we all experienced him for 4 years, and they just don't want another 4 like that. Who's to say it will be? I don't know. I'm kind of ambivalent on the whole thing, going, okay, let's just move forward.
Yeah.
And as we've talked about, all we want to do is go to work.
Yeah.
Make a living, enjoy our family, and get the hell out of my life.
And that was the other thought that hit me. It was like, and I've made this point probably on the air before too, that, why did America stand up on its hind legs? Like, why now? Why that? What was it? And I think, if you go back even to the Revolutionary War, the countrymen weren't really sold, right? They're like, well, look, everything's just fine here. I've got my little farm, and I've got my, I'm raising my family, and I'm toiling with the soil, and I'm working hard, but life is pretty good. What do I care? Well, why do I care if you've got taxes in Boston?
Yeah.
Right. So they didn't really buy into it until it was in their backyard.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden they've got battles in their backyard, and they see other Americans getting killed.
Right.
And the next thing you know, you've got people coming out of the woodwork. And
the British, they stirred up the Indian tribes where they could to attack the colonists, and the colonists are like, well, wait a minute.
Right. We weren't going to fight. Now we have to.
Right. You're burning down my log cabin. You're killing
my family.
The
same thing in 1812. Why are we fighting the British? I didn't get impressed into service out into the in the oceans. What do I care? It's like a handful of dudes. Fine. Yeah. Let's just figure that part out and let's go back. And then, almost at the end of the war, Britain decides to burn Washington.
Yeah.
And it's like, you burn our White House.
Yeah.
Now we got a freaking problem.
Yeah.
Right. Now you've criticized my wife. Now we have a problem. So then all of a sudden, everybody bows up.
Right.
And it's the same thing in World War I. It's the same thing in World War II. I mean, they had to bomb Pearl Harbor.
Yes.
And I mean, we were more than content to sit and watch everything burn.
Yeah.
As an American pop. Now, we can argue whether that's a good, but those are American values. We just want to be left the F alone.
Yeah, there is, Steve, that's so on. There is a thread of American isolationism in our character where we're like, because George Washington set the tone, don't get entangled in foreign affairs, was his advice when he left office, is stay out of foreign wars. Right. And there is that thread all the way through American history that you have to almost drag America. You have to hit us down at the World Trade Center, right, for us to go over to Afghanistan and fight.
And care.
Yeah.
And care.
Osama bin Laden.
Even if there's like things that would normally justify any fight. It's like we're not going to get involved.
Yeah.
And so this election reminded me of that ideal, that American
America
ideal.
First.
It's like, wait a minute. You guys can fight about all you want about whether, even abortion, you guys can fight about that crap all you want. You can fight about this over there. These aren't my concern is I want to be able to earn a living at whatever income stratus I'm in. And I want to be able to raise my kids and have Christmas and have Hanukkah or whatever it is, or whatever it is you worship. I just want to do those things. Leave me the F alone.
Yeah, and let me choose.
Don't tread on me.
Let me choose what light bulbs I can buy. Let me choose what kind of car I can buy. Let me choose what home appliances. If I want to gas this or an electric that. Those are consumer choices. Let me decide what's best for me.
And in the estimable words of Clint Eastwood, don't piss down my neck and tell me it's raining. Right? And Josie Wales, don't piss down my neck and tell me it's raining.
Right.
And that's what they did.
Yeah.
That's what they did. Don't worry about this. We have, this isn't inflation.
Well, bigger brains, we've figured out what your future should look like, and we've decided where you're going to live and what your transportation is going to be and what people should study in college, and we just know better than you do.
Right. And,
and it's like, man, you don't talk to Americans like that.
And you don't call me stupid.
Yeah.
Don't call me ignorant.
Yeah.
Don't tell me I've been fooled.
Yeah.
Don't tell me I don't care.
Right.
It's like that is that list I came up with. It's like because they're all a response to criticisms, and the opposite is true in every one of those.
You know what really shows that, Steve, is that the Teamsters and the UAW did not endorse anybody. And I think that was their recognition that they understood that their memberships were very split.
Right.
And they were not going to give Kamala an endorsement. And they didn't feel like they could give Trump one because they were probably split about 50-50, like the country.
See, I'm not so optimistic about that. I think they didn't want to give Trump one because they were looking to still curry favor with Biden and his union connections. I mean, I could be wrong about that, but I always follow the money.
But by not endorsing,
it's a big deal.
Big deal.
Yeah.
And then
Same with
LA
Washington
Times
Post.
and the LA Times.
Yeah. Which I would love to see that as a trend.
I would too. Right.
Any organization.
Yeah. Just do the news. Quit trying to convince me of things.
Right, exactly. And
Just do
the
the
unions, all these organizations backing and endorsing is like, does it make a difference?
Doesn't matter.
Does it matter necessarily?
Hey, let's talk about issue one because they spent a ton
of money.
They outspent the issue no people 7-1 on dollars, and yet issue one went down.
Yeah,
and you and I predicted it was going to pass. We could not have been more wrong.
Right, and seeing who came out to vote in Ohio and who didn't, I think that made a difference.
Yeah,
a lot more red than blue came out to vote.
And they just said
in certain areas,
it's
I think you're right.
if politicians decide district border lines. If we don't like it, we'll vote that politician out. But I don't want these unaccountable people to make those decisions. It was a smart vote.
I wonder. I don't know if there's a lot of truth to this or not, but you hear the excuse of it was confusing. I don't know. I didn't know it. I didn't understand. it. It's like
there was probably some of that.
I guess,
I bet
but
it cuts both ways.
I think it goes both ways. One reporter talked to a woman who came out of the voting booth and she changed her vote in the middle of it. Said, "I think I voted the wrong way." And I'm thinking, you're an idiot. First of all, if you're not researching and writing it on a piece of paper,
figure it out if you need to. Right?
Before you go in,
advance.
don't read what's there.
Yeah.
Because why would you want to read it while you're there under pressure?
So
you got to make a choice. That's a stupid move. First of all,
here's Steve Palmer's remedy to that. If you don't understand it, don't vote for it.
Don't vote for it.
I agree. And
skip the ticket.
It's okay.
And I follow that. I do that.
That's okay.
Like when there's two judges and it doesn't show the parties. Now it does. But back in the old days, it wouldn't show the affiliation. And you'd see Smith and Jones. And I'm like, I don't know which one's better. I'm not going to vote. I didn't do the research. So I'm going to give that to somebody who did do the research.
So do you vote for a candidate if they're unopposed?
No, I never do.
I was wondering.
I never do because I think that gives a signal to that candidate that everybody loves
Gotcha.
me.
I'm just curious because I saw that. I guess I do for some reason.
And I wrote in Steve Palmer the last time DeWine ran. I'm like, I'm not giving DeWine my vote. I'm giving Stino. Right?
Along those lines, I only vote for single or people who are unopposed if I know that person and like them.
Okay.
And then I'll give them a vote.
Sure. Okay.
Because I want them to know.
That makes sense.
Right.
And not that they would ever know, but it's like to me that's like a symbolic thing. Say,
gotcha.
All right.
It's like an endorsement.
And to me on judges, I don't care what your party is. I don't care. If you're a judge, I don't care. I care how good you are as a judge.
Yes.
And
yes.
Because I live that day in and day out.
Yeah.
And I think what's happened is because we politicized it, we are getting appointments and candidates for judge who don't have the experience.
Yeah.
At least used to be judges would come up through the ranks of the prosecutor's office or they would have some experience in the courtroom doing stuff. And a lot of times now they just don't.
And I've talked to one colleague of mine who ran for municipal court or something like that, and she had to pick a DNR or R. She went with the R. It didn't have to pick, but that's where she leaned anyway. But anyway, I think it's almost a negative to go with a party because she mentioned, at least for the Franklin County Republican Party, they don't have their shit together.
No, they don't.
No,
So it was almost a negative.
It's a captured operation.
Exactly, that it didn't help her get the position because that, at least at this point in time, the R's in this county don't have it together.
To Steve's point, there was a Columbus councilwoman, I think, that won one of the Franklin County judgeships. So there'll be so instead of
she won the prosecutor's office. She is now the sitting county prosecutor.
Okay. Thank you. That's what it was.
And
that's an odd way to come up, right? To your point,
it's a political.
You would think they would come up as assistant prosecutors, learn, the job,
or at least have some look. Particularly the Franklin County Prosecutor's Office. That is probably, I've said, at least in the top 3 or 4 most powerful positions in the state.
Wow.
I mean, think about it.
Yeah.
Like the government sits here and you're deciding who to prosecute and who not to prosecute.
Yes.
And you've got to be sort of a CEO because now you're running like the county services, you're running the criminal prosecutions. You're involved in all sorts of governmental decisions.
Right.
And we're electing people that have zero experience with that. And maybe she's going to be awesome, but not based on a resume.
So, so speaking about prosecutors, the little national thing, did you guys see where Gascon lost?
Gascon lost.
Out in LA, like 62 to 38.
This election was a rebuke of all things left.
Yeah.
It really was.
It really was.
It really was. And, we have... that included, right? So the tough on crime stance is back.
And that issue passed in California, the anti-crime issue, where shoplifting, I think it's after the 3rd shoplifting, it's a felony. Mm-hmm. And the people voted for that.
Yeah. This is insane.
Like they're done with this $1,000 like ceiling where you could just, get a gang together, everybody steals $1,000 worth of stuff, and it's kind of like not going to get prosecuted. And people said to Gascon, "You're out, man. Like it's ruining the cities.
Yeah, you're done.
You're hollowing out downtowns."
And it's and people there's some ancillary impact that benefits the Republican Party here too, is because people are fleeing California in droves.
Yes, they are,
and they're going to lose. I've heard commentators talk about this. They're going to lose representatives.
Yes,
in the next census.
Yes, I think at least 1, maybe 2.
Yeah. And New York, same way.
Yes.
I mean, it's like, be careful.
Be careful.
Be careful. You screw up your own backyard that badly, and people leave. There is a consequence to that, and we can talk about whether you should have representation equally or not have representation. But I had this talk with my son and somebody else recently. It's like it only exemplifies the genius of the founding documents. How this all unfolded.
Yeah.
Like no state has complete power. No one party can grab total control.
Right.
At least not forever.
Yeah.
All right.
If you don't screw it up.
Yeah.
Right. And looking at the midterm elections too, look at the swings that every president has to go.
2 years in, they lose one side.
So in 2 years,
yeah,
it'll probably change. It's just it gets back to that point. It's like nothing is forever.
This is what scared me, and this is the other thing. Like when you really, I think those who really dug in to some of these sort of hidden agenda items, you would hear quotes from Kamala and her kin talking about eliminating the filibuster in the Senate, so they could then pack the court, so then they could add D.C. as a state or Puerto Rico as a state. And, it's like those kind of things scare the crap out of me because it gives one side almost power forever, and that's not good. There's no restraint. So it shows you how tenuous it is, like if you have total control. And I pray that the Republicans don't think they can do something similar and get away with it.
Right.
They cannot.
Yeah. I think there's more reverence for the Constitution on the Republican side because they don't view it as a real living document, unless you go through the effort, to amend it. And there's a recipe for how you do that.
There's
right
a book.
in there.
It comes with an instruction book.
It comes with an instruction book, and the Republicans are kind of like, for the most part, most Republicans are like, follow the amendment process. If you don't like the Second Amendment, do the work and change it.
And if you can't, that should tell you something because it requires a certain level of support, a fairly substantial level of support. So it's like the old saying where the conservative ideal, the conservatives walking through the woods, they come upon a fence, and they're gonna climb over it and leave it there.
Yeah.
Because they're gonna think, well, that's probably there for some reason.
Yeah.
The extreme left will come upon that fence and why do we have this fence here? Let's just tear this down without thinking about why it's there. And it might be worth tearing down. It may not be worth tearing, but you got to at least consider why it's there.
Yeah.
And leave it in place until you're totally sure it's not something that you want to
bring out a surveyor, go file in court that there's been an encroachment on your land. Follow the process.
And the process is, I had this conversation with somebody else recently when somebody lost a loved one and they're like, yeah, they're not even having a funeral. They're not doing this. They said the kids don't have to come. And I'm like, wow. We mourn loss like that for a reason. Somebody just didn't wake up overnight and say, all right, first there's the showing and then there's the funeral and then there's the burial. It's there's a trapping to it, and maybe it's too much. But we sort of do that for a reason.
Like the pyramids.
Yeah, it's like
that might have been too much.
But we do that for a reason because it helps us mourn the loss and move on.
Yeah.
And there's a reason when people say, why are you conservative? It's like, you don't understand I'm conserving some of these traditional things that need to stay in place. I fight for that stuff. And the Constitution is one of them. And you can't just willy-nilly change it with an executive order and expect all that to just work out.
Yeah.
After 200 and some, after all these years, now you think you've got it figured out with the stroke of your pen.
Like the student debt thing, like Biden's just going to wipe out student debt, and the Supreme Court had to tell him twice, you can't do this, dude. Appropriations bills start in the House, and this is an appropriation. You're actually repaying other people's debts. That's spending money. The Constitution's very clear that is a congressional thing, not presidential. Right. And it's like there's a rule book, as you say.
Yeah, I think in the country, interestingly to me, understood that on Tuesday.
Yeah,
they understood that on Tuesday. We can't just dismantle the country. You can't just let people come in and do it. No, you can't do that.
Yeah.
And I don't think it was a partisan thing as much as it was a rejection of those values.
I agree.
And people wanted to preserve what they know to be the American dream. And I think even the classical liberals, the sort of the Kennedy type Democrats would say the same thing, right? This is our country. We love it. We might.
Well, Trump actually had a Kennedy.
Yeah, we might. We might differ a little bit about how you get to or how you preserve it, but let's keep the core values. And I think when they started to tinker with the core values, it was like, hold on.
Yeah.
Enough's enough. We're not going along.
Did you see his acceptance speech where he told RFK, when on the health issues with the FDA, take the ball and run with it. Just don't argue with me about oil.
Our black gold, right? Our black gold.
But that right there in that little couple sentences, Trump showed his flexibility, that he could understand liberal, if you will, concerns with the food chain and with how pharmaceuticals get approved, whether it's too long or too little, and about additives.
Trump is putting Democrats in advisory roles.
Absolutely.
Elon Musk 2 years ago was a Democrat. I mean, these people.
Tulsi Gabbard.
RFK. It's like, right. I know Rogan. Rogan used to argue for we need a committee, government by committee, which is, that's a very short-sighted view of government because somebody's got to be in charge. But in essence, that's what the cabinet is.
Yeah.
And Trump has sort of surrounded himself with various sources. So look, it's yours, my friend. Do well. Go forth and prosper with it. Stay off the tweet button.
Yeah, please do. And as you said, surround yourself with the best people you can find.
And look,
RDI, whatever.
Right.
Just get the best sources you can and make the best informed decision that you can.
Yep. And I will tell everybody here, he is not Hitler. He's not going to be a fascist. He's not going to there's not going to be any internment camps for women and trans and homosexuals. I mean, it's just like, it's such hyperbolic nonsense. None of that will happen.
We do need to make also this note that in Ohio, we now have a 6-1 Supreme Court with 6 Republicans, 1 Democrat.
My buddy Dan Hawkins took a seat.
Yeah. So I mean, that's pretty epic. Yeah. Now, an interesting thing happened in the House in Ohio, and I mean the state legislative House of Representatives. They lost 2 Republicans. The Senate lost 2 Republicans. But in the House, you can amend bills right on the floor if you have at least 60, 2/3. If you have 2/3 majority, the Republicans, by losing 2 seats, no longer have that. And that might be a good thing. Maybe you should not amend bills. To Steve's point, he said many times, and I agree, I like the committee process where things are vetted and argued at the committee level before it goes to the floor. And the Republicans were able to amend bills right on the floor, quickie-dicky, right, because they had 2/3. Having lost these 2 seats, they no longer have that power. They still run the House, but they can't inject an amendment in.
And that's a good thing.
I think that's a good thing.
And you're probably going to bring this up too, but while we're looking at Ohio, we'd have a unique situation that doesn't happen a lot, that with Vance, now VP, that's an opening that DeWine
That's right. Yeah.
fits in. So that list is what, 6 people?
Oh, man.
Potentially?
A lot of people are. Matt Dolan, Frank LaRose. I mean, there are a lot of people. That,
exactly.
The Timken lady that ran in the
she on the
primary.
list? I didn't see
She's
that.
on the
Okay.
list.
And then I never can pronounce his name right. He's from in Upper Arlington.
Vivek.
But I don't think I've heard he's going to move to Texas.
And I think he's also interested in maybe in a cabinet job.
Okay, so
Vivek Ramaswamy, he was at COSI yesterday, I guess, talking, or a couple days ago, giving a speech. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him there. He might have to. He might have a choice to make.
I noticed Brett's wearing a Jeep hat today. There's some Jeep news. Go into that, Brett.
Well, just we talked about this recently. That the Jeep plant in the Akron area, Toledo, excuse me, laying off 1,100 workers.
Wow.
At that Jeep plant.
A whole shift, right?
A whole shift, what I'm saying. But again, they're not just walking out the door with nothing. They're going to have some benefits for a year or so and some outlay plans to help them move on. But it's that, again, we're going back to that. We talked about this earlier, this corporate welfare, that we do this rah, that we give all these companies money, state money, to bring in 100 employees. 100 employees, but we are allowing, without discussion, 1,100 to walk out.
It's a real failure.
You would have to ask, I think we're going to look back. The auto industry is like this roller coaster of peril since inception.
It's a mess.
But look, if we're trying to cram down from above what cars we want people to buy,
it's crazy,
and it's not going to work.
It's not going to work.
No,
it's not going to work. It just isn't. And, it's not. What's interesting to me is that the one guy who was able to build an electric car that people liked is what's his
Elon. Yeah,
and he didn't do it. He's not a big 3 auto guy, right? He had to do it a little bit differently.
Yeah,
and that's a little telling. And his market share isn't that great either, right? There's still not a huge demand for electric vehicles. I mean,
it's not huge.
No, it's
so the
not.
people that want them are buying those.
It's well under 10% of sales.
The people that want one is buy a Tesla. Why wouldn't you? They're awesome.
Yeah. Right.
If in that realm.
Right. For a short commute, and plug it in at home and, state of the art and all that, I can see
lots of cool technology.
Wealthier people wanting something like, and that's fine. And I'm not against them.
I'm not against, and I think abandoning or forcing rather full EVs.
Yeah.
It was way premature. And there was a middle ground. There's a market for the hybrids.
That's right.
There's a market for those. So if you're somebody who has to drive 2 hours every day,
that's right.
There's a market for that. Because I've even kicked it around. Sometimes I commute all over Ohio. It's I could just get a little hybrid Civic or something.
Yeah, or Prius.
Yeah. That's what I meant, Prius. And that might have some value to me. I'd have to do the research, but I can see a market share for that.
For sure.
But then saying you can't have your gas car, you can't have your dually, you can't have your truck, you can't have this. It's again, America's not going to stand for it.
No.
They're not going to stand for it. They're going to, in their own garages, build the cars they want.
And again, we're not at the board sitting around why Jeep has decided to go 100% EV.
Yeah, Stellantis, the parent company.
On these larger pieces, why?
Yeah, Ford same way.
It's incongruous that you have electric vehicle and Jeep in the same sentence.
Right.
It just is.
It is.
Or
it's crazy.
Electric Colorado.
Yeah.
Or
But there is a I think you could find a way to merge a hybrid with a Jeep because
Yes.
it's like this idea of going off road.
Exactly.
And you can get solar, and you could do like there's different cool things you could make it.
Yeah.
Like I
Right.
can see Jeep sort of taking that angle.
Yeah.
But if you run out of battery out in the desert, you can still start the motor.
You can still start the motor
Right.
and charge it up.
Yeah,
Right.
you're not stuck.
You're not stuck. Or,
Right.
you could camp and put your solar stuff out, or do whatever you're going to do, or you could start your engine and preserve your gas, and you could go out for days.
Weren't you guys thinking that during the the hurricane effects that hit North Carolina? Those people, some are still without power to this day. Can you imagine having an EV in that situation?
Yeah, you're done.
Yeah,
You-
you're done.
Like, even if you could cross the creek in your 4-wheel drive and go to the next town and get groceries, you can't.
You can't.
You don't have a vehicle.
It's not there yet. And again, it's the idea. It's government lies. Like don't piss down my neck and tell me it's raining. Don't tell me that an EV is every bit as good or what you should have instead of a gas car, because it's not.
Yeah.
And we're not Europe. We don't have rail.
Well,
everywhere.
Europe has rejected EVs also.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, we don't have the mass transport
that's
that Europe
right.
has
Yeah,
as
that's
an
right.
alternative.
Because we're more spread out.
Right. We need cars.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to go from New York to LA, you're not going to do a 10-day Amtrak.
No, you're not.
I mean, come
You're
on.
going to get on a plane that uses jet fuel,
Yes.
Yeah.
or you're going to get in your car and drive.
Yeah.
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 So this statistic just blows me away. So at one time, for about 25 years, Ford was the #1 car seller in Europe. So that means over 50%, obviously. They are now down to 3.5% market share.
Who's got the highest market share
Volkswagen.
Volkswagen?
In Europe. In Europe.
in Europe?
Wow.
Because they own so many brands. Like
Oh,
they
I
own
gotcha. How about in the United States?
Bentley.
Okay.
Ford
Is Ford the number one car in the U.S.?
No. Toyota, and then they ping pong with Volkswagen.
Huh.
Toyota and Volkswagen go back and forth for worldwide market share and in the U.S.
Interesting.
Yeah, because Volkswagen, they got Audi, Porsche.
Okay.
You start adding up all their brands.
Well, that makes sense.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah, that makes sense.
But-
If you want to spend a lot of money on maintenance, makes a lot of sense.
Yes, it is.
Makes a lot of sense. No, not for the Toyotas. I own a Toyota. And,
Yeah.
and that thing, I'm going to run it till the wheels fall off.
Yeah.
And then replace the wheels and run it till they fall off again.
And Chairman Toyota with a D, the CEO of Toyota, 2 years ago made news when he said the EVs are never going to, for the next 50 years, EVs are not going to be the dominant vehicle of choice. If you let people pick free market wise, if you don't, prematurely end the fossil fuel engines, people are going to have a need for fossil fuel engines. It's just per pound the most efficient fuel source, more so than electricity. When you see how much caloric energy, this is chemistry. When you burn gasoline, you get more power per pound out of that fuel than you do out of natural gas or LP or nuclear, or just go down the list. That it's just, we have refined the internal combustion engine so well that some people say what's coming out of the tailpipe is sometimes cleaner than the ambient air in a city like Rome, Italy, which has terrible air quality.
Yeah, no, I've heard, and I think that you can extrapolate that. That's also true of modern coal facilities.
Yeah.
Like they're scrubbed so clean.
Yeah.
Like everybody thinks coal, you like that billowing black smoke, but that's the latest technology before they poo-pooed it all is very, very clean.
Where catalytic converters came from for cars was from burning coal. They literally took the same catalytic materials that are in smokestacks and put them in everybody's car. It's a little spin-off of that technology.
Yeah.
So
Interesting. Yeah.
Well, look, we should probably I should interject something here. Usually, we've been following a certain protocol that I abandoned today here at the show. So usually we would still do our this day in history. I made it very political because
It's a good
an
one.
election.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we would get to news with Norm. And but I wanted to talk about the election before we did it. But we've covered a few news stories. But just to keep us on the
you want to
agenda.
do the outrage wonderful thing?
Oh, we'll get to that. We got a few more minutes here. But any other? I mean, look, we've ticked off a bunch of news stories, and most of them election oriented. But
Well, I was going to ask you, and again, since we're kind of off topic and we're going around, we'll make this an unusual show. So now that Trump is elected, where does all these court cases go?
Yeah, I was going to say. So we've got an injustice for all segment here.
That's big.
Already, the feds are going to drop the cases. So the federal cases are going to go away, right? They can't prosecute a sitting president.
Do they go away, or can they be put on hold?
They're going to get dismissed, and by the time it's done, I don't know what the statutes of limitations would be on those cases, but they'll be gone. They'll be done. They'll be done. Interestingly enough, what's the AG in New York?
Letitia James.
She's already saying, I'm still going after him. I'm going to still keep the agenda, and I'm going to, it's like, it's so foul.
I think Kathy Hochul, who's governor in New York, may pardon Trump. Like she has the power to do that because it's a state case.
Yeah, so the feds can't. And somebody was surprised by this. Might have been in my lawyer talk. I do this. They don't teach you that in law school series, and people don't always realize that the president can't pardon a state case. You can't be pardoned from a state prosecution or state conviction by a sitting president. That has to happen at the governor level or whatever state level there is.
Yeah.
But I think there's still a couple big question marks, like what happens if Trump is convicted or is sent to prison,
sentenced on the 19th of this month.
I don't think they're going to sentence him to prison. And if I'm his lawyers, I would be postponing that and moving to. I would waive time, meaning I would waive everybody's right to waive my client's right to a speedy trial, and request the court to sort of back burner the case and not do anything. I doubt that'll happen. So I don't know what the sentence will be, or if he is sentenced to prison, they would have to delay the execution of the sentence until after he's done with the presidency. But I think if he goes to prison or he's not able to serve, that would fall in advance. Is it the 20th Amendment, maybe?
Yeah, and that was that case. The one where he's in jeopardy is the 34 felonies for business records.
It's a terrible case.
Yeah, and Jonathan Turley was on the one of the Talking Head shows yesterday, and he said he thought Judge Juan Merchan, who's the judge in that case, even though he has been very pro-prosecution in many of his rulings, Turley said there are so many appealable layers in that case that Trump's lawyers, were he sentenced to time, could get an abeyance and start to appeal and appeal it to death.
Here's how this works. So if Trump is convicted and then he's sent to prison. The first thing that's going to happen once you're sent to prison on a conviction like that is you're going to file a notice of appeal. You're going to appeal to the higher court.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, I think in New York that's called the Supreme Court, and they've got a higher court that's different. But so the direct appeal in New York is the Supreme Court, but that's not the highest court in the land.
Yeah.
Then you would ask. So the procedure in Ohio would be you would ask the trial court judge, for bond pending appeal. So we want a stay of execution of sentence. We want our client on bond while we appeal the process all the way up. And if the trial judge says no, then you ask the Court of Appeals to say yes to that. I would think somewhere along in the hierarchy that somebody would grant Trump an appellate bond while he goes through the appellate process. They might even stay the proceedings. That's what I'd be arguing for, is a stay of all the proceedings until he's done with his presidency. I mean, look, as a matter of public policy, if they try to send the president-elect to prison,
that's crazy.
I do that at your own peril.
For business records,
for a dumb case that never should have been brought.
Yeah,
it's not like murder, right?
No.
So even if it were a legitimate even if you took that side that the prosecutors were legit,
it's a paper crime. I was just going to
say, let's say it was legitimate. Let's say that he. It's black and white.
For sake of argument, let's say
it was.
It's a paper crime.
Because it's an interesting scenario.
It's an interesting scenario, right?
Because
send that guy to prison at your own peril.
I know, though.
Because
that's the thing.
It looks like Trump's got the popular vote, so you're going to send that guy. And look, this is the other part of where we started. Like lies. Right. You can't. These are facts without change. The people don't give a crap about that case because the case isn't give a crap worthy.
Even the banks that lent the money said we suffered no loss.
We made money.
There was no victim in that crime.
So Fannie's case is falling apart already down in Georgia. And the Florida records case.
She got reelected, though, but whatever.
The Florida records case is going to dissolve because that's a federal prosecution, and that was already on its way out anyway.
Yeah, she dismissed it.
And then the J6 case is that's going to be toast. So it's going to come down to whatever. What's her name? I always forget her name in New York.
Letitia James.
Yeah. Okay. It's going to come up to whatever she can concoct plus anything new and plus that case. So it'll be interesting. And then you wonder if they, I would be worried most about assassination. I'd be worried about what happens then.
Yeah.
You would have to really, I would hope they're really upping the security on both men, both
for
Vance
God's
and
sake.
Trump.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For and obviously for future candidates from both parties.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, it's regardless. It doesn't matter.
Well, and Harris can still be in the trigger here as well too. That it's that you failed us.
Yes.
Oh yeah, from her own side.
Oh, my
some
gosh,
radical
yeah.
in her own party.
I mean,
Yeah.
they all are. Yeah, you don't know what's going on in these
The
crazies'
the
heads
Supreme Court-
to do what they do. So you don't know their reasoning. So it could be at any point in time.
It's
It's
like-
sad, but
Looking back on this, it's so obvious. Like, who would have known that the candidate who ran in a primary election and got 0 votes from her party
Yeah.
would lose?
Yeah.
Like, who would have known that after sort of instilling that same candidate into the presidency, into the election as a candidate for presidency, with like 6 weeks to go,
Yeah.
and all her prior policy positions were radical, who would have thought she would lose, even though she tried to change her opinion on everything?
Right.
It's like, who would have thought she would lose when she wouldn't go on any media show and be interrogated or interviewed, legitimately interviewed
Yeah.
about what her policy choices
Yeah.
were. It's like, you can't piss down your neck
And you can't
say it's raining.
The reply, even on friendly programs like CNN and MSNBC, when she's interviewed, she starts out with this canned thing where I grew up in a middle class
Right.
neighborhood.
Just-
You're like,
it's bullshit.
no, that's not the question. The question is, what are you going to do about the border? Specifically.
And I think there was a way she could have made a race at this. If she would have
Yes.
said, we screwed up on the border.
That's right.
Trump had this right. Look, I don't like that man. I don't agree with
Yeah,
most of his policies,
right,
but
right.
Trump had that right.
Right. And
Yeah,
I'm
right.
gonna do what he.
And we're going to go back to stay in Mexico.
It could have changed a lot if
Changes
she had
everything.
said that.
Just that one thing.
That one thing.
If she would take it a little bit further with a couple other issues,
Right.
she could do it. It's like, listen, we overspent
Right.
and we created some inflation. We're not going to do that again.
Yeah.
because she could easily throw Joe under the bus.
She could have.
And she should.
But what the hell?
Well, I don't.
Why
but,
not?
But she could have done it together. Look, Joe and I look back on this, and we created some inflation here. We acknowledge that, and look, we felt we needed to do it at the time to help the American people. Now we need to help the American people out of that, so we're going to reverse it.
Right.
Like just those two things.
I think
I agree with you.
you're right. Candidates, politicians underestimate the power of we recognize we did something wrong.
That's
and
right.
Here's how we're going to fix it.
They won't-
Authenticity.
I
Authenticity.
just
Trump
think,
included. Trump doesn't do it enough.
I know exactly.
Just be real.
Be real about
real.
you made a mistake because we do not expect or even think that you're perfect.
Right.
Quit thinking that
Right.
and portraying that
Right.
because you're not.
Right.
None of us are. There's only been one that has been.
One that has been, and he ain't running
And-
for president
exactly.
of the United States.
Yeah.
Exactly.
One of the things Trump, like to his discredit, keeps acting like it was a great achievement was that rushing the vaccines. Like he said, we this was a great achievement. It's like, Don.
Sort of shut up about that towards the end of the election, though. or
Yeah,
towards
it's
the
like,
end of the
dude,
campaign.
whatever the name of that program was, Emergency Tornado, or I don't know, they had one of those fancy names. It was like, dude, that was a mistake.
Trump, because of what happened here, because of not getting reelected in 2020, he's really better off.
Yeah.
He doesn't. He first of all, he's not walking into a Democratic Congress.
Yeah.
He's walking into what appears to be both the House and the Senate.
There's not going to be a third impeachment.
There's not going to be a third impeachment. Secondly, he's not going to have to bear the brunt of his poor COVID policies.
Yeah.
Because he had some. Look,
Some were terrible.
He gave the country up to Fauci to do it. Do your best, Fauci, and and look, I don't know what Trump would have done with forcing vaccines, but Biden sure took that and ran with it.
That's right.
So he didn't have to walk into the sort of the tail end of COVID. He didn't have to walk into a Congress that was controlled by the Dems.
Right.
And he didn't have to walk into any criticism about how he handled the Fauci stuff or backpedal that, because Trump's not good at that. Trump's not the guy who's going to say, I sort of screwed that one up, to your point, Brett. And it's like, so he's walking into a different scenario. Now he's still got a buzzsaw. The Middle East is a mess. You got Ukraine, you've got inflation, and you've got the border.
So if we want to go around and do a few wonderfuls and outrages, I actually have that on my list, what you just mentioned about the wars. So one of the wonderful things, I won't do an outrage thing today because, we kind of talked about them. But Hamas reacted to his election, or re-election, if you want to call it that. Hamas said, we're ready to cease hostilities. because they know.
It's just like Carter back in 1980. Right?
They know.
It's the same thing.
They know Netanyahu is spinning the revolver chambers and is loading up with Trump bullets.
Right.
And Hamas is like
I didn't know that happened.
Yeah, they actually put out a press release that said, not congratulations, Trump, but we recognize Trump's election, and we want to use this occasion to reach out and olive branch with Israel. We're ready for peace.
Subtext: we know you're batshit crazy,
so
we just don't know.
I mean,
we know that any support that we had in the United States government is now gone.
And Putin also issued a statement that said he is ready for compromise. And Trump hasn't talked to Putin yet as of
Isn't that
last
incredible?
night, but he has talked to Zelensky. And you know how Trump said, even before I take office, I'll have a peace plan for that war, the Ukraine war. He just might.
He just might.
Yeah. I think it's fantastic. Primetime coverage of the presidential election was down huge, 26% over the last 4 years.
Really? Wow. That's interesting.
That is real interesting. And I think it's wonderful because it may be a wake-up call for legacy media to wake up and start to change.
Start to just talk just give us facts.
Yeah. Give us facts.
Right.
I don't care
facts
about
without change.
Or at least if it's an opinion stuff, really showcase it that it's an opinion rather than mixing it in and trying to make it in news.
100%.
I hope that's a huge drop in 4 years.
Yeah.
It's enormous.
You would think that Fox would have run away with it, and they didn't.
Elon put out this big tweet that the election really is the end of this stuff with the legacy media gaslighting people with these fake issues.
I hope.
I
hope so.
This has got to end, and that the new news media now, of course, he's puffing up his own channel with Twitter, with X. But he is saying now the American people can be their own media. They can report directly to their fellow citizens on these forums now. If the media is not going to be honest, the American people have the means to express themselves.
Because having a journalist badge does not mean crap anymore.
Not anymore.
It just doesn't. And I get we all look at things with a certain lens.
That's right.
So when we report on something, it will be through that lens.
Right.
Granted.
Right.
But feet on the street reporting something may actually be better, even through a lens, because it's
be straight up.
Straight up.
This is why, and I guess my wonderful and outrage are all surrounding the media. So, and it's sort of what you're talking about. Media figures. What I find outrageous is that media figures have become essentially like celebrities.
Yes.
So, Don Leming, he supports men. Blah.
Yeah.
I support this guy. I support this guy. And then I find it equally ridiculous, if not outrageous, that celebrities go and support like their presidential candidate, like somehow they know best.
Yeah.
Like it used to be in medieval times, if you wanted justice, you would have like compurgation where you would just bring in your 12 priests and their 12 priests and whoever was most crowded. It's like, it's absurd.
Yeah.
Right. It's absurd because you have more people that'll swear on your behalf that you must be telling the truth. And that's sort of what it looks like. And then at the same time, what is wonderful is like the Rogans. And not because Rogan came out and actually endorsed Trump, but because Rogan had and invited everybody onto his show.
Yeah, he did.
To say, let's have a discussion.
Yeah.
Let's learn who you are.
Right.
Let's use this new media that we are engaged in right here and use it to share you with the American people so they get to know their president. And it's the functional equivalent of like the caboose speeches in the old days when the presidents would come through and they would have to talk to people.
Yeah.
And not just be protected by Secret Service all around them. Like I envision like after their talk, they would get around and mingle and have their coffee and crumpets with the crowd. And that's how people would get to know you. I don't trust the media, the mainstream, the legacy media to do that anymore.
They filter and even alter things.
In 60 Minutes situation.
Yeah, 60 Minutes.
And that they're not the only one. So it's like hats off to the podcasters and the alternative media sources who acknowledge, because here's the other thing to your point, Brett, the alternative podcast sources generally acknowledge their bent. You know, like, look, we're conservative or we're this or we're that. We're or intuitively what it is, and they don't argue with it.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, you know what you're getting.
That's right.
And I think that's important. So
I do want to note for our show, so this is a little bit of chest beating, but Joe Rogan has the #1 podcast in America, right? We had J.D. Vance in our podcast, right, before Joe Rogan. I just want to
but
point
also
that.
before he was a candidate for vice president.
True.
Right.
And by the way, so Bernie Moreno, right, was in here in person for an hour, and now he's a U.S. senator. So
Well, look,
that's awesome.
Look, like or hate Bernie Moreno, that's the point I'm making. He was willing to come in here and sit right at that chair where Brett's sitting.
That's right.
And talk.
That's right.
And not only that, like not Zoom. And not with any time, like he was on a bit of a schedule, but he would have sat here for 2 hours.
Yeah,
probably if he could have, he would have.
And just talk.
And I asked him a few zingers.
We asked him some questions.
Yeah. I mean, I said, for example, Bernie, do you think that we have an open border because they're trying to turn Texas blue? And he didn't think so. I think he has since rethought that. But at the time when he was, this was during the primary, he actually didn't think that there was this conspiracy to let in illegals to change the vote, which I personally think there was.
Well,
I think that was part of the motivation.
They certainly deemed it a plus.
Yeah.
If not,
but Bernie took the fire here.
And right, he was willing to share everything there is to look. Nobody is going to share their deepest, darkest secrets just because it's a podcast. But I think Kamala Harris's outcome may have been different if she would have been capable.
Yes,
I use it that way, capable of sitting down at Rogan's table,
right,
and talking to him.
Long form.
A long form.
Yes.
Talk about what do you do day in and day out? What's your life look like? Who are you?
Okay, you came up in a middle class neighborhood. Okay,
let's talk about
now
that.
we have 299. We have a lot of 179 other
Let
minutes.
us get to know you. What was your dad like? What was your mom like?
Right.
Vance answered some of those questions.
That's right.
And sort of candidly.
Yeah.
In ways I thought, man, you probably shouldn't swear so much. But he acknowledged, I swear, I got this old habit. But he became a more likable guy as a result of that.
Yeah.
And so look, you only have yourselves to blame, legacy media people, and the Democrats for not engaging outside that realm.
Yep. And if your answer is that all the Trump voters are sexist and racist, you didn't learn anything.
You didn't learn anything
because you're calling your own Democrats who voted for Trump those things, and clearly they're not. They're just not.
They're not.
Right.
So, well, look, it is a brave new world we embark upon the next 4 years and change. We shall see how it goes. But I can tell you one thing that will be constant: Common Sense Ohio we will at least be doing our best to bring you common sense week in and week out right here from Channel 511 Studios C. If you want to check us out online, that's easy. Just go to commonsenseohioshow.com. Go to Facebook, go to YouTube, go to Rumble, go wherever you like to get your social media fix, because we are there, I promise. And we will be back next week coming at you right from the middle. But for now, we'll see you then.